The family reunion was planned for the last week of July at the Grandview Resort and Spa in Lake Geneva. 3 generations of the Patterson family, all gathering to celebrate my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. The reservations had been made 9 months in advance, coordinated through a group chat I'd been removed from after asking too many questions about costs. I'd booked my own room separately. Same hotel, different confirmation number. I preferred it that way. When I pulled into the circular driveway in my aging Subaru, my brother Derek was already standing near the entrance with his wife Brittany. They were unloading matching Louis Vuitton luggage from their Range Rover. Derek saw me and his expression soured immediately. "Really, Maya? You actually came?" I stepped out of my car, pulling my simple black rolling suitcase behind me. "Of course I came. It's Grandma and Grandpa's anniversary. We thought you'd have the sense to skip it." Brittany adjusted her designer sunglasses. "Given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Derek laughed, harsh and sudden. "The circumstances where you can barely afford to be here? This place is $500 a night, Maya. Minimum. And that's before the resort fees and all the activities Dad has planned." "I'm aware of the rates. Are you? Because last I checked, preschool teachers don't exactly make bank." He looked at my car, my suitcase, my simple cotton dress. "You're going to stick out like a sore thumb all week. Designer dinners, spa days, golf tournaments. How exactly are you planning to pay for all that?" "I have savings." Brittany snorted. "Savings? Right. Listen, Maya, we're not trying to be mean, but this is embarrassing. For all of us. You showing up in your teacher clothes with your teacher car, counting pennies while the rest of us are trying to enjoy a luxury vacation. Then don't be embarrassed. I'll keep to myself. That's not how family reunions work." Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, there's a Holiday Inn about 15 miles from here. Much more your speed. You could still come to the anniversary dinner on Saturday, but the rest of the week you could just not be here. I already have a reservation. Which you probably can't afford. Maya, come on. Be realistic." My sister Charlotte emerged from the lobby, her heels clicking on the marble. She took one look at me and sighed deeply. "Oh no. Maya, what are you doing here?" "She has a reservation," Derek said. "I'm trying to convince her to cancel it." Charlotte's perfectly made-up face creased with worry. "Maya, sweetie, did you talk to Dad? Because he specifically said he didn't think you should come. He didn't want you to feel pressured to spend money you don't have." "Dad said that." "Well, Mom said it. But Dad agreed." Charlotte touched my arm gently, her manicured nails bright red. "We love you. You know that. But this week is going to be expensive and we know teachers don't make much. We don't want you going into debt just to keep up appearances." "I'm not going into debt." "Then how are you paying for this?" Derek challenged. "Seriously, Maya. Show us your bank statement. Prove you can actually afford to be here." "I don't need to prove anything to you." "See? Because you can't." He turned to Charlotte. "She can't afford it. She's going to put it all on credit cards and then spend the next 5 years paying it off. It's irresponsible." My father appeared in the doorway, his golf shirt crisp and his expression stern. Behind him, my mother wore a flowing resort dress and concern. "Maya." Dad's voice had that disappointed tone I'd heard my entire childhood. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About this." He gestured vaguely at me, at my car, at everything. "Charlotte told us you were still planning to come despite our conversation." "We didn't have a conversation. Charlotte had a conversation with me where she suggested I shouldn't come. Because we're worried about you." Mom stepped forward, her voice pleading. "Honey, this place costs a fortune. Every meal, every activity, every little thing. We don't want you to bankrupt yourself trying to keep up with everyone." "I'm not trying to keep up with anyone." "Then why are you here?" Dad's question was sharp. "If you're not trying to prove something, why insist on coming to a resort you clearly can't afford? It's Grandma and Grandpa's anniversary. And you could celebrate that at the dinner on Saturday without spending thousands of dollars you don't have on a week at a luxury resort." He crossed his arms. "Maya, I'm going to be blunt. We don't want you here. Not because we don't love you, but because we don't want you embarrassing yourself. Or us." The words hung in the air between us. "Embarrassing you," I repeated slowly. "You know what I mean." But his eyes shifted away from mine. "You're a teacher. You make what, 40,000 a year? Maybe 50? And you're standing here at a resort where people drop that much in a week. You don't belong here and deep down you know it. Brittany nodded supportively. It's like if I tried to hang out with actual celebrities. Sure, I could technically be in the same room, but everyone would know I didn't belong. It would be awkward for everyone. We just want to enjoy this week, Charlotte added. Without worrying about you. Without feeling guilty every time we order wine or book a spa treatment because we know you're sitting in your room counting dollars. I won't be in my room counting dollars. Then what will you be doing? Derek demanded. Because all the activities Dad planned are expensive. The golf tournament entry alone is $300 per person. The wine tasting is $200. The sunset yacht cruise is $500. Are you going to sit them all out? Just wander around the resort by yourself while the family does things together. Or worse, try to join in and put it all on credit cards, Brittany added. Which is just sad, Maya. Really sad. My mother's eyes were wet. We're saying this out of love. We don't want you to spend the next year digging yourself out of debt because you were too proud to admit you couldn't afford a vacation. Find a motel you can afford, Dad said firmly. Something reasonable. You can still come to the anniversary dinner. But the rest of the week you need to go. This isn't your world, Maya. It never has been. I looked at each of them in turn. Derek with his arms crossed, confident in his superiority. Brittany checking her phone, already bored with the conversation. Charlotte looking sympathetic but immovable. Mom wringing her hands, worried but agreeing. Dad standing rigid, waiting for me to comply. Okay, I said quietly. Dad blinked. Okay. I'll leave. You won't be embarrassed by me. Relief flooded their faces. Mom actually smiled. Oh honey, I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. We'll see you on Saturday for the dinner and it'll be lovely. No pressure, no stress. Sure, Mom. I got back in my Subaru, started the engine and drove out of the circular driveway. In my rearview mirror, I saw them already moving toward the entrance, laughing about something, the tension of the confrontation dissolving like it had never happened. I drove exactly 1 mile down the road to the coffee shop in the small town center. Ordered a lot. Sat down at a window table with my phone. Then I made a call. Good morning, Miss Patterson. James Hendricks answered on the first ring. James was the regional director for Grandview Luxury Resorts, overseeing all 7 properties in the portfolio, including the flagship location in Lake Geneva where my family was currently checking in. How can I help you? James, hi. I need you to pull up the reservation for the Patterson family reunion. It should be under Gerald Patterson. One moment. I heard typing. Yes, I have it. Party of 23, booked through Saturday. Presidential suite, 4 luxury suites and 6 standard rooms. Very nice group booking. I need you to flag it. Flag it how? Owner review. All charges, all activities, all privileges. I want to be notified of every single thing they do this week. There was a pause. Is there a problem? Let's call it due diligence. How many complaints has that property received in the past quarter? Lake Geneva? Maybe 3 or 4. Nothing serious. Why? And how many has it received about the Patterson party specifically? None that I'm aware of. But they just checked in 20 minutes ago. Right. Well, keep me updated. If there are any issues with guest behavior, staff treatment, anything at all, I want to know immediately. Of course, Ms. Patterson. I'll make sure the property director is aware. Thank you, James. I ended the call and sipped my latte. Through the window, I could see the lake sparkling in the distance. The Grandview Resort sat on the northern shore, all glass and elegance, with its private beach and championship golf course. I'd bought it 3 years ago. Well, I'd bought the parent company that owned it, along with 6 other luxury properties scattered across the Midwest. The total acquisition had cost me $42 million, funded by the tech company sale that my family still knew nothing about. Because I'd never told them. After teaching for 6 years, I'd spent my evenings building an educational software platform. Something I genuinely cared about, that helped teachers manage classrooms more effectively. I'd worked on it alone at first, then hired developers as it gained traction. Within 3 years we had 12,000 schools using it. When a major education technology corporation offered to buy it, I'd said yes. The sale netted me $68 million after taxes. I kept teaching for another year because I loved it. Then I'd quietly transitioned to consulting and started investing. Real estate felt tangible, understandable. Hotel seemed like a natural fit. The Grandview chain was struggling when I bought it. Good properties, poor management, no vision. I'd replaced the executive team, upgraded facilities and implemented new training programs for staff. Within 2 years we were profitable again. Within 3 we were thriving. My family knew I'd changed jobs. They knew I did something with consulting. They'd never asked for details and I'd never offered them. When I showed up in my sensible car wearing Target dresses, they'd made assumptions. I'd let them. Now I was wondering if that had been a mistake. My phone rang. James Hendricks again. That was fast, I said. You're going to want to hear this. He sounded tense. I just got a call from Margaret. She's the property director at Lake Geneva. Apparently your father demanded to speak with management about 10 minutes ago. About what? He's claiming there was a booking error. Says a room was reserved under the name Maya Patterson, and he wants it cancelled immediately. Says the person who booked it isn't actually coming and he doesn't want to be charged for it. I closed my eyes. What did Margaret tell him? That she couldn't cancel a reservation without authorization from the guest who made it. He got aggressive. Started saying he's the head of the family party, that he should have authority over all the bookings, that it's ridiculous a hotel wouldn't listen to a guest spending over $50,000 for the week. $50,000? I whistled. He's really going all out. Apparently. Margaret held firm on policy, but he's demanding to speak to her supervisor. He's in the lobby right now making a scene. Tell Margaret I'm coming back. 20 minutes. You're coming here? I own the place, James. I can come whenever I want. I heard him smile. Fair point. I'll let her know. The drive back to the resort took 15 minutes. I parked in the owner's reserved spot, a space my family would have walked right past without noticing, and entered through the side entrance that led directly to the administrative offices. Margaret Chin was in her office on the phone looking stressed. She was 53, brilliant at her job and had been with Grandview for 6 years, 3 before my acquisition and 3 after. We'd worked closely during the renovation process. She knew my family was here. She didn't know they were my family. She looked up when I walked in and relief flooded her face. She wrapped up her call quickly. Miss Patterson. Thank goodness. James filled me in. Is my father still in the lobby? Your father. She blinked. Gerald Patterson is your father? Unfortunately. Oh no. Oh Miss Patterson, I'm so sorry. If I'd known. You handled it exactly right. Don't apologize. I sat down across from her desk. Tell me what happened. She explained the confrontation. Dad had approached the desk demanding the cancellation. When the front desk clerk explained they needed authorization from the guest who made the reservation, he'd raised his voice. Said it was absurd that a hotel wouldn't work with its biggest spender of the week. Implied the clerk was being difficult on purpose. Demanded a manager. Margaret had come out, reiterated the policy, and offered to try calling the guest to request authorization. Dad had refused, saying it was unnecessary, that he was telling them to cancel it and that should be enough. He's still out there, Margaret said. Sitting in the lobby with your mother and siblings, complaining loudly about poor customer service. Other guests are starting to notice. I see. I stood up. Let me handle this. Are you sure? I can have security. No security. Not yet. Let me talk to them first. I walked down the hallway toward the lobby, my footsteps silent on the plush carpeting. Through the glass doors I could see my family clustered near the fireplace. Dad was gesturing emphatically while talking to Derek. Mom looked embarrassed. Charlotte was on her phone. I pushed open the doors and walked straight to the front desk. The clerk, a young woman named Sarah who'd been with us for 8 months, looked relieved to see me. Miss Patterson, she said quietly. I'm so sorry about the situation. You did great, Sarah. Don't worry. I raised my voice slightly. Now, I understand there's an issue with a room reservation? Dad's head snapped up. He strode over to the desk, ready for another fight. Finally, someone with authority. He didn't even look at me, his eyes on Sarah. I need you to cancel a reservation made under the name Maya Patterson. The guest isn't coming and I refuse to pay for an empty room. I can't cancel that reservation, sir, I said calmly. Why not? I'm telling you she's not coming. Because the guest who made the reservation is standing right here. He turned to me then really looked at me for the first time since I'd entered. Maya? What are you doing here? I thought you left. I did leave. I came back. Why would you? He stopped, confused. Wait. Did you talk to them? Did you convince them to let you stay? I don't need anyone's permission to stay here, Dad. Yes, you do. I'm not paying for your room. You want to be here so badly, you can pay for it yourself. I am paying for it myself. I always was. With what money? Derek had joined us now, Brittany at his elbow. Maya, seriously, this is getting pathetic. Just admit you can't afford this place and go. I can afford it. Stop lying. Dad's voice was rising. Other guests were definitely watching now. We all know you barely make enough to cover rent. You drive a 15-year-old car. You shop at Target. You're a preschool teacher, for God's sake. I was a preschool teacher. Now I'm a hotel owner. The silence was immediate and total. Charlotte laughed nervously. What? I own this hotel. And 6 others. I turned to Sarah. Sarah, can you pull up the ownership records for Grandview Lake Geneva? She typed quickly, her fingers shaking slightly. Yes, ma'am. Property owned by Grandview Luxury Resorts, LLC. Principal owner, Maya Elizabeth Patterson. That's... Dad's face was white. That's not possible. It's very possible. I bought the company 3 years ago after selling my educational software business. The sale netted me $68 million. I invested $42 million of it in acquiring Grandview. Mom made a small sound like air escaping. You sold a business? Charlotte's voice was faint. What business? Classroom Connect. It's an educational platform used by about 40,000 schools now. I built it while teaching, sold it in 2022. Derek was shaking his head. No, this is some kind of joke. It's not a joke. Margaret had appeared beside me, her expression professional but her eyes sharp. Ms. Patterson has owned these properties for 3 years. She's been an excellent owner, very hands-on during renovations, very supportive of staff, very committed to guest experience. But you're a teacher, Mom whispered. You teach preschool. I did teach preschool. I loved it. But I also built a company on the side, and when someone wanted to buy it, I sold it. Then I kept teaching for a while because I enjoyed it and eventually transitioned to consulting and investing. Why didn't you tell us? Dad demanded. I tried to. Remember when I said I'd changed jobs and was doing consulting work? You said consulting was just a fancy word for unemployment. When I mentioned I'd made some good investments, Derek said I probably put $100 in an index fund. When I offered to help Charlotte with her business startup costs, she said she didn't need pity money from her struggling sister. Each example landed like a physical blow. I could see them remembering, the memories clicking into place. But you still dress like... Brittany gestured at my outfit. Like you shop at clearance sales. I do shop at clearance sales. I like a good deal. Why would I spend $300 on a shirt when I can get one I like just as much for $30? And your car, Derek started, is reliable, fuel efficient, and paid off. I don't care about cars. Why would I spend money on something I don't care about? Your apartment, Charlotte said weakly. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I live in a 3-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park that I own outright. It has 1 bedroom because I don't need more space. Why would I maintain empty rooms? Dad sank into a nearby chair. This can't be real. It's very real, Dad. You're standing in the lobby of a hotel I own. You just tried to cancel my reservation at my own property. And for the past hour, you've been complaining about customer service to staff who report directly to me. Margaret stepped forward. Mr. Patterson, I need to inform you that hotel policy requires respectful treatment of all staff members. The complaints you made to the front desk staff were noted. Ms. Patterson has instructed us to flag your party for owner review. Owner review? Mom looked panicked. What does that mean? It means every aspect of your stay will be monitored, I said quietly. Every charge, every activity, every interaction with staff. Any further issues and your stay privileges can be revoked. Stay privileges? Dad's voice cracked. Maya, you can't be serious. You're going to kick us out. You kicked me out 2 hours ago. Told me I didn't belong here. Told me to find a motel I could afford. We didn't know. Know what? That I own the place. or that I could actually afford to be here. I looked at each of them. Would it have mattered if I was just a teacher who'd saved up for this vacation? Would I have belonged then? No one answered. That's what I thought. I turned to Margaret. The Patterson party can stay, but the owner review flag remains active. Any staff complaints, any behavioral issues, any problems at all, I want to know immediately. Yes, ma'am. Maya, wait. Mom reached for me, but I stepped back. I have a reservation here. Room I paid for. I'm going to check in now and enjoy the facilities. You all can do the same. But if you approach me, if you harass me, if you try to have another family meeting about how I don't belong here, I will have security escort you from the property. Are we clear? Dad's face was red. You can't do this. We're family. Family who told me I was an embarrassment. Family who didn't want me here. Kept my voice level. I'm giving you what you wanted. You get to enjoy your luxury vacation without worrying about your poor sister counting pennies. I'll be here too, but you won't have to acknowledge me. You can pretend I don't exist, just like you've been pretending my success doesn't exist for 3 years. We didn't know about your success. Charlotte protested. You never told us. I tried to tell you. You didn't listen. You made assumptions about who I was and what I was worth, and you never questioned those assumptions. Not once in 3 years did any of you ask me about my work, my investments, my life. You just decided I was failing and treated me accordingly. Sarah handed me a key card. Room 412, Ms. Patterson. Top floor, Lakeview. Your usual suite. Thank you, Sarah. I took the key, then looked back at my family one last time. Enjoy your vacation. Try to be kind to the staff. They work hard. I walked toward the elevators, my rolling suitcase trailing behind me. Behind me, I could hear my family erupting into urgent whispered conversation, but I didn't turn around. The elevator doors closed and I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. My phone buzzed. A text from James Hendricks. Margaret briefed me. Are you okay? I typed back, fine. Just tired. Take the rest of the day. Decompress. I'll handle anything that comes up. Thanks, James. Another text, this time from a number I recognized as Charlotte's. Maya, please. We need to talk. This is insane. You can't just shut us out. Then Derek. You're being extremely immature about this. So we made a mistake. Get over it. Then Brittany. If you're really rich, why do you act so poor? That's honestly kind of manipulative. Then Mom. Sweetheart, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Let's have dinner tonight and work this out like adults. Then Dad, this is absurd. I'm your father. You will speak to me with respect. I turned my phone off. The suite was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, a king bed with luxury linens, a marble bathroom with a soaking tub. I'd stayed here dozens of times while overseeing renovations and operations. It felt more like home than my family had in years. I ordered room service, changed into comfortable clothes, sat on the balcony watching boats drift across the water while the sun set in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in this hotel, my family was probably still talking about me, trying to understand, trying to reconcile the sister they thought they knew with the reality they just discovered. Maybe feeling guilty, maybe feeling angry, maybe both. But that wasn't my problem to solve. I'd spent 3 years being quietly successful while they assumed I was struggling. 3 years of gentle corrections that were ignored, of accomplishments that were dismissed, of trying to share my life with people who'd already decided what my life was. I was done trying. Tomorrow I'd go to the spa, book a massage, maybe play a round of golf. Enjoy the resort I'd worked hard to restore and maintain. And if I happened to see my family in the hallways or restaurants, I'd smile politely and keep walking. They wanted me to find a place I belonged. I had. It just wasn't with them. My phone, still off, sat on the nightstand. I knew when I turned it back on there would be more messages. More demands for explanations, for conversations, for me to make them feel better about treating me poorly. But not tonight. Tonight I was going to soak in the enormous bathtub, watch a movie on the premium television, and sleep in 1,000 count sheets at the hotel I owned. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd see if my family could manage to get through one day without embarrassing themselves at my resort. Somehow I doubted it. The backyard barbecue had seemed like a harmless idea when Mom first mentioned it 3 weeks ago. Just a casual Saturday afternoon, she'd said. Some neighbors, a few friends from the country club. Nothing fancy. I should have known better. By the time I arrived at my parents' house in McLean, Virginia, there were at least 40 people in the backyard. White tents. Catered food. A bartender mixing cocktails. Nothing about this was casual. "Sarah." Mom called out, waving me over to a group of well-dressed couples. "Come meet the Hendersons. They just moved in down the street." I'd driven straight from a 14-hour shift at the Pentagon, still wearing my standard work attire. Dark pants, conservative blouse, minimal jewelry. I looked tired because I was tired. The situation in the South China Sea had kept me in the operations center until 3 in the morning. "Sarah works for the government," Mom announced, as if introducing a moderately interesting houseplant. "Oh, how nice," Mrs. Henderson said politely. "What do you do?" This was always the difficult part. "I'm an analyst," I said, which was technically true. I analyze threats to national security on a global scale, but analyst was a word people understood. "Defense Department," Dad added from behind me, managing to make it sound apologetic. "Can't really talk about it. Very hush-hush." He said hush-hush like it was embarrassing. Like I worked in classified intelligence operations out of some character flaw rather than patriotic duty. "That's so interesting," Mr. Henderson said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. "I'm in private equity. We just closed a $2 billion deal last quarter." "Congratulations," I said. The conversation moved on without me. It always did. My parents' social circle consisted of lawyers, executives, entrepreneurs. People who could discuss their work freely, whose success was measurable in dollar amounts and job titles that impressed strangers at cocktail parties. I excused myself and found a quiet spot near the back fence, pulling out my laptop. Not my personal MacBook, but the hardened Panasonic Toughbook that was rated for classified operations and could survive a 3-story drop onto concrete. I logged in using my fingerprint iris scan and a 16-character password that changed every 72 hours. 3 new intelligence briefings since I'd left the Pentagon 2 hours ago. A situation developing in Eastern Europe that would require my attention by Monday morning. A request from SOCOM for cyber support on a hostage rescue operation. Routine assessments from my regional directors in Stuttgart, Tokyo, and Dubai. I was reviewing the European brief when my brother Marcus appeared, beer in hand. "Working at a party?" he asked. "That's rude, Sarah." "Just checking email," I lied. Marcus was 2 years younger than me and worked as a consultant at McKinsey. He made excellent money, traveled constantly, and never missed an opportunity to remind me that his career was going better than mine. "You know, you could probably make twice what you're making now in the private sector," he said, settling into the chair next to me. "Defense contractors are always hiring analysts. Better pay, better hours, actual career advancement." "I'm happy where I am," I said, closing the laptop. "Are you, though?" He gestured at my outfit, my tired face, my government-issue laptop. "You're what, 31? Still living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Still driving that 10-year-old Subaru. Working insane hours for government pay. Mom and Dad worry about you. They don't need to worry. They think you're wasting your potential. I mean, MIT grad, top of your class, master's in computer science, and you're doing what? Pushing papers at some government office that can't even tell us your job title." My actual title was Deputy Director of Operations for U.S. Cyber Command, but he was right. I couldn't tell him that. "It's more than pushing papers," I said quietly. "Sure it is." He drained his beer. "Look, I'm just saying you had options. You chose the one that pays the least and gets the least recognition. That's fine if you're happy. But you don't look happy, Sarah." He was right about that too. I wasn't happy. Not because of my job, I loved my work. But because conversations like this happened every single time I saw my family. Every holiday, every birthday, every casual barbecue where I had to pretend my career was less important than it was. I was saved from responding by Dad's voice booming across the backyard. "Everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" The crowd quieted. Dad stood on the patio holding a glass of wine, looking pleased with himself. "I want to take a minute to brag about my kids," he announced. "Marcus just made senior consultant at McKinsey at only 29 years old. We're incredibly proud of him." Marcus smiled and waved as people applauded. "And my daughter Sarah works for the government in some capacity we're not allowed to discuss," Dad continued, and there was scattered polite applause. "Some low-level agency position, I think. She can't even tell us what she does exactly, which is, well, it's very mysterious." He laughed. Other people laughed. I felt my face flush. But we love them both very much, Dad finished, raising his glass. To Marcus and Sarah. To Marcus and Sarah, the crowd echoed. I opened my laptop again, needing something to focus on besides the humiliation. The secure email system loaded, showing a new priority message from Admiral Richardson, commander of U.S. Cyber Command. Subject: Urgent Russian intrusion detected. Classification: Top secret ///// no foreign. I felt my entire body tense. This was the alert we'd been dreading for months. The message was brief. Russian intelligence services had penetrated the Department of Energy's nuclear security networks. They were inside the systems that monitored the nation's nuclear stockpile. This wasn't a probe or a test. This was a direct attack on strategic weapons infrastructure. My phone buzzed. A text from Richardson: Need you at the Pentagon now. Bringing this to the Joint Chiefs in 30 minutes. I stood up, already calculating travel time. 20 minutes to the Pentagon if traffic was light. I could make it. Sarah, where are you going? Mom asked, intercepting me near the gate. I have to go to work, I said. Now. It's Saturday afternoon. It's urgent. Everything is always urgent with you, she said, and there was real frustration in her voice. Can't you ever just take a day off and be normal? This isn't something that can wait, I said, pulling out my keys. What could possibly be so urgent that you have to leave your father's barbecue? She looked at me like I was being deliberately difficult. You're an analyst, Sarah. Can't someone else analyze things for a few hours? I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her that I wasn't just an analyst, that I was responsible for defending the entire nation's cyber infrastructure, that Russian intelligence services were currently inside our nuclear security networks, and I was one of maybe 15 people in the world who could coordinate the response. But I couldn't tell her any of that. I'm sorry, I said instead. I really have to go. I was halfway to my car when Dad caught up with me. This is embarrassing, Sarah, he said bluntly. We have guests. Important people. And you're just leaving. There's an emergency at work. There's always an emergency, he said. Or so you claim. You know what I think? I think you use work as an excuse to avoid family events. You've never liked these gatherings, so you make up some crisis and disappear. I'm not making anything up, I said, frustrated now. This is real. This is important. More important than family? Right now. Yes. His face hardened. You know what your problem is. You have no sense of proportion. You take this little government job so seriously, like you're saving the world or something. It's just a job, Sarah. It's not your whole life. My phone buzzed again. Richardson, Russians are moving deeper. Need your assessment ASAP. I have to go, I said, getting into my car. We'll talk about this later, Dad said. Your mother is very upset. I drove away before he could say anything else, already calling my operations center on the secure line. This is Vanguard, I said, using my operational call sign. I'm en route. ETA 15 minutes. Get the watch team spun up. I want a full briefing package ready when I arrive. Copy that, ma'am, the duty officer responded. Admiral Richardson is already in the operations center. The Joint Chiefs have been notified. This is going to the President. 15 minutes later, I was through Pentagon security and heading toward the secure facility that housed U.S. Cyber Command. The corridors were mostly empty on a Saturday afternoon, but the operations center was fully staffed. It always was. Admiral Richardson met me at the entrance. He was a career Navy officer, 3 stars, and one of the smartest people I'd ever worked with. Sarah, thank God, he said. It's bad. They're in deep and they know we know. They're actively trying to map our nuclear command and control architecture. I followed him into the operations center, logging into my workstation. The threat display showed the Russian intrusion in real time, a sprawling network of compromised systems, all connected to the Department of Energy's most sensitive databases. How did they get in? I asked, pulling up the forensic data. Spearphishing campaign 3 months ago, my lead analyst said. They've been moving laterally through the network ever since, staying just below our detection thresholds. We only caught them because they got greedy and started pulling too much data. I scanned the attack vectors, the malware signatures, the command and control infrastructure. This was sophisticated, state-sponsored, and terrifyingly effective. Admiral, We need to brief the Joint Chiefs immediately, I said. And we need authorization to execute defensive countermeasures. Already scheduled, he said. Video conference in 10 minutes. I want you presenting the technical assessment. I had just enough time to prepare a briefing before the secure video system connected to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. 6 faces appeared on screen. The chairman and the chiefs of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force. The most senior military officers in the United States. Gentlemen, Admiral Richardson began. We have a significant situation. Russian intelligence services have penetrated Department of Energy nuclear security networks. I'll let Deputy Director Chen brief you on the technical details. I pulled up my presentation. Sir, at approximately 1400 hours today, we detected unusual data exfiltration from DOE nuclear security systems. Forensic analysis indicates Russian SVR operatives have had persistent access for approximately 90 days. 90 days, the chairman interrupted. They've been inside for 3 months and we're just finding out now? Yes, sir, I said. They used advanced techniques to evade our detection systems. The good news is they haven't reached the most critical systems yet. The bad news is they're actively working toward them. What can they access? The Air Force chief asked. Currently, nuclear inventory data, facility security protocols, personnel information. If they reach their apparent objective, they could access nuclear command and control authentication systems. The room went silent. Jesus, someone muttered. Deputy Director Chen, the chairman said. What's your recommendation? Sir, I recommend immediate authorization for active cyber defensive operations. We need to kick them out of the network and disrupt their command infrastructure. If we don't act in the next few hours, they may reach systems that could compromise our nuclear deterrent. Active operations means offensive operations, the Navy chief said. We'd be striking back at Russian networks. That's escalatory. Letting them compromise our nuclear command and control is more escalatory, I replied. Sir, with respect, we're past the point of passive defense. We need to hit them hard enough that they know we're serious. The chairman looked at Admiral Richardson. Admiral, your assessment? I agree with Deputy Director Chen, Richardson said. This is what we've built Cyber Command for. We have the capability. We need the authority. I'll take this to the President, the chairman said. Stand by. The video conference went on hold. I looked at the clock. It was 4:47 p.m. My parents' barbecue was probably still going. People were probably asking where I went. Dad was probably making excuses for me. And I was in the Pentagon waiting for authorization to launch a cyber attack against Russia. My personal phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Mom says you left. Really classy, sis. I put the phone away. 23 minutes later, the video conference reconnected. The chairman's face was grim. Deputy Director Chen, you have presidential authorization to execute defensive cyber operations against the Russian intrusion. Rules of engagement are in your briefing packet. The president wants this resolved before it hits the media. Yes, sir, I said. We'll get it done. The video conference ended. I turned to my team, 18 of the best cyber warfare specialists in the world, sitting at workstations throughout the operations center. You heard the chairman, I said. We have authorization. Execute Protocol Cobra. I want those Russians out of our network within the hour, and I want their command infrastructure degraded enough that they think twice before trying this again. Yes, ma'am, my lead operator said, fingers already flying across his keyboard. I pulled up my own console and started coordinating the operation. We had assets positioned around the world for exactly this scenario. Teams in Germany, Japan, the UK, and 3 locations in the continental United States. All of them were ready to execute. Initiating first phase, someone called out. Isolating compromised systems. Second phase ready, another voice said. Preparing counter-intrusion vectors. I watched the operation unfold across multiple screens. It was like conducting an orchestra, but instead of musicians, I was coordinating hackers, analysts, and network specialists executing a carefully choreographed assault on Russian cyber infrastructure. 37 minutes into the operation, my phone rang. My personal phone, not the secure one. I almost didn't answer, but I saw it was Mom. Sarah, where are you? She asked, her voice tight. I'm at work, Mom. I told you I had an emergency. The neighbors are asking questions. They want to know why you left so abruptly. Your father is furious. I can't explain right now, I said, watching as my team successfully ejected the Russian operatives from the first set of compromised systems. I'm in the middle of something important. Everything is always important with you, Mom said, and now she sounded close to tears. Nothing is ever as important as your family. Do you even care what we think anymore? On my main screen, the operation was entering its final phase. We'd kicked the Russians out of our networks and were now systematically dismantling their command infrastructure. It was working perfectly. Mom, I need to go, I said. Of course you do, she said bitterly. You always need to go. She hung up before I could respond. Ma'am, my lead analyst called out. We've successfully removed all Russian access. They're completely dark, attempting to execute countermeasures against our counter-intrusion efforts, but they're failing. Good, I said, refocusing on the mission. Push forward. I want their command servers offline. 17 minutes later it was done. The Russian intrusion had been completely eliminated from our networks. Their command infrastructure had been degraded by approximately 60%. And we'd left behind a very clear message in their systems. A digital signature that they would recognize, letting them know exactly who had hit them. Mission accomplished, Admiral Richardson said, reviewing the results. Outstanding work, Sarah. You just prevented what could have been the most significant compromise of U.S. nuclear security in history. Team effort, sir, I said, exhausted. Your team, he pointed out. Your plan. Your execution. I'm putting you in for a commendation. Thank you, sir. I didn't leave the Pentagon until almost midnight. The debriefings had taken hours, and then there was the after-action report to write, and the coordination with the Department of Energy to ensure their networks were properly secured. By the time I drove back to my apartment in Arlington, I had 37 missed calls and 53 text messages from family members. The texts ranged from concerned to angry to baffled. Call me immediately. Dad, this is unacceptable behavior. Marcus, what the hell is going on with you? Aunt Jennifer, your mother says you walked out of the barbecue. That's not like you. Cousin Mike, everything okay? I sat in my car in the parking garage, too tired to deal with any of it. But I knew I had to call them back eventually. I tried Mom first. She answered on the second ring. Sarah. Finally. Hi, Mom. I'm sorry I left earlier. Something came up at work. Something always comes up at work, she said. Do you know how embarrassing it was trying to explain to our guests why you disappeared? What did you tell them? That you had some minor emergency at your government job. Some paperwork crisis or something. I tried to make it sound important, but honestly, Sarah, how important can it be? I wanted to laugh. A paperwork crisis. That's what she told the neighbors. That I'd left to deal with paperwork while I was actually coordinating a cyber attack against Russian intelligence services. It was more serious than paperwork, I said carefully. I'm sure it felt serious to you, Mom said, her tone patronizing. But you have to understand how it looked from our perspective. We're hosting this nice event, introducing you to successful people, and you can't even stay for a few hours. It makes us look bad. It makes you look unstable. I'm not unstable, Mom. I'm doing my job. A job that apparently requires you to work every weekend, miss every family event, and maintain this ridiculous level of secrecy. Sarah, normal people don't live like this. Normal people have work-life balance. My work isn't normal, I said, the frustration finally breaking through. It's not a 9-to-5 office job. It's not something I can just walk away from when it's inconvenient. Because you're an analyst, Dad's voice said. He'd picked up the other extension. An analyst who acts like she's running the CIA or something. It's absurd, Sarah. You're not that important. The secure phone in my bag buzzed. A message from Admiral Richardson. President was briefed on today's operation. He specifically asked me to pass along his thanks to you personally. Outstanding work. The President of the United States had personally thanked me. And my parents thought I was an overdramatic analyst having a paperwork crisis. I need to go, I said. It's late. We're not done with this conversation, Dad said. We need to talk about your priorities. My priority is my job, I said. And I'm good at it. Really good at it. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for your social calendar. I hung up before either of them could respond. It was petty and I'd probably regret it in the morning, but I was too tired to care. I went upstairs to my apartment, the one-bedroom place in Arlington that my family considered evidence of my professional failure. What they didn't know was that it was in a building specifically designated for senior intelligence officials, with security features that cost more than most people's houses. I'd barely gotten my shoes off when someone knocked on my door. I checked the security camera and saw Marcus standing in the hallway. "What are you doing here?" I asked, opening the door. "We need to talk," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. "It's midnight, Marcus." "I don't care." He turned to face me and he looked genuinely upset. "What's going on with you?" "Mom and Dad are worried." "I'm worried. You're acting like some kind of secret agent, disappearing at random times, working insane hours, never talking about your job. It's weird, Sarah." "I'm not acting like anything," I said. "I'm just doing my job." "Which is what, exactly?" "Because nobody believes the analyst thing anymore." "You don't act like an analyst. You act like someone with serious authority. The way you talk, the way you carry yourself, even the way you dress. That's not low-level government employee behavior." I was too tired for this conversation. Too tired to maintain the cover story. Too tired to pretend my work wasn't important. "Marcus, I can't talk about my job. I've told you this 100 times. Can't or won't. Both." "That's not good enough," he said. "Not anymore. Mom and Dad deserve better than vague non-answers. I deserve better than that. We're your family. And because you're my family, I'm trying to protect you," I said, my voice rising. "You think I maintain operational security because I enjoy being mysterious? I do it because the less you know, the safer you are." "Safer from what?" "From being targeted by foreign intelligence services." I shouted and immediately regretted it. Marcus stared at me. "What?" "Nothing." "Forget I said that." "No, explain that." "Targeted by what?" I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think. I was already in violation of security protocols by even having this conversation. But Marcus was my brother and he was standing in my apartment at midnight demanding answers, and I was so damn tired of lying. "Sit down," I said. He sat on my couch looking wary. I pulled out my credentials wallet, the one I carried every day but never showed to family. I flipped it open and showed him the badge inside. Sarah Chin, Deputy Director of Operations, U.S. Cyber Command, Top Secret / Psi Clearance. Marcus looked at the badge. Then at me. Then back at the badge. "This is real?" he asked. "Yes." "You're a Deputy Director?" "Of Operations for Cyber Command, yes. I coordinate all offensive and defensive cyber operations for the U.S. military." "How many people work for you?" "Approximately 2,000, depending on how you count contracted personnel." He was quiet for a long moment, processing. "And today's emergency?" he asked finally. "Russian intelligence services penetrated our nuclear security networks. I coordinated the response. We kicked them out and destroyed their command infrastructure." The president was briefed. "It was a successful operation." Marcus looked like I'd just told him I was from Mars. "Russian intelligence," he repeated. "Yes." "Nuclear security." "Yes." "And you coordinated the defensive cyber operation?" "Yes." He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city. "How long have you been doing this?" 9 years total. 5 as deputy director." "And you never told us." "I couldn't tell you, Marcus. Everything I do is classified. The operations I coordinate, the threats I deal with, even my job title. It's all top secret. Telling you would be a federal crime." "But we're family." "Which is exactly why I can't tell you," I said, repeating what I'd said to Mom earlier. Family members of senior intelligence officials are prime targets for foreign intelligence services. The Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, they all maintain databases of family relationships. They track you. They look for vulnerabilities. The less you know about my actual work, the less valuable you are as a target. That's insane. That's reality, I said. This is why I can't come to family barbecues and chat about my day. This is why I can't explain what I do or why I work the hours I work. It's not because I don't trust you. It's because I'm trying to keep you safe. Marcus turned back to me. Does anyone else know? Besides you? No. And you can't tell them, Marcus. Not Mom, not Dad, not anyone. I shouldn't have even told you. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this conversation. But today, when you left the barbecue, you were literally going to defend against a Russian cyber attack. Yes. And Mom told the neighbors you had a paperwork crisis. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Yeah. That's what she said. Marcus laughed too, a little hysterically. This is insane. You're important. You're really important. I'm doing my job, I said. No, he gestured helplessly. You're defending the country. You're fighting Russians. You're briefing the president. And Mom and Dad think you're some low-level analyst wasting your potential. It's better that they think that, I said. It's safer. We talked for another hour. I couldn't tell him specific operational details, but I gave him a general sense of what my work involved. The scope of the threats. The scale of the operations. The responsibility that came with the position. I need to go, he said finally. I need to process this. You can't tell anyone, Marcus. I'm serious. I know, he said. But you need to understand, Mom and Dad, they don't know they're being assholes. They think you're underachieving. If they knew the truth. They can't know the truth, I interrupted. Not ever. This conversation never happened. You never saw my credentials. You know nothing about what I actually do. Understood. He nodded reluctantly. Understood. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. Telling Marcus had felt necessary in the moment, but it was a security violation. One I couldn't take back. My secure phone buzzed again. Another message from Admiral Richardson. Joint Chiefs want to brief Congress on today's operation. Going to need you to testify in closed session. Monday morning. Prepare accordingly. I sighed and opened my laptop. Looked like I wouldn't be sleeping much this weekend. But at least one person in my family finally understood why. The following Monday, I sat in a secure briefing room in the Capitol building, facing the Senate Intelligence Committee. 15 senators, all with appropriate clearances, all wanting to know exactly how close we'd come to catastrophe over the weekend. I walked them through the operation step by step. The initial detection. The forensic analysis. The authorization process. The execution of defensive countermeasures. The successful conclusion. Deputy Director Chin, the committee chairman, said when I finished. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for your service. What you and your team accomplished this weekend was nothing short of extraordinary. Thank you, sir, I said. Just doing our job. A job most Americans don't even know exists, he replied. But one that's absolutely vital to national security. The hearing lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Admiral Richardson was waiting outside. The Secretary of Defense wants to see you, he said. Tomorrow morning. Something about a promotion. I blinked. Sir. Director of Operations is retiring next month, he said. Word is you're being considered to replace him. That would make you one of the youngest 3-stars in Cyber Command history. 3-star General. Director of Operations instead of Deputy Director. Even more responsibility. Even less ability to explain my work to my family. I'll think about it, sir, I said. Think fast, he said. The world isn't getting any safer. That evening I had dinner with Marcus at a restaurant in Georgetown. He'd asked me to meet him, said it was important. I've been thinking about our conversation, he said after we ordered. About why you keep your work secret. Good, I said. Because that conversation never happened, remember? I know. But I wanted to say I get it now. I understand why you can't talk about it. And I'm sorry for giving you shit about your career all these years. It's okay. No, it's not, he said. I've been a terrible brother. We all have. Treating you like you're failing when you're actually... He lowered his voice. When you're actually one of the most important people in government. I wouldn't go that far, I said. I would, he said. And I think Mom and Dad need to know something. Not the specifics, but something. They're worried about you. They think you're isolated and unhappy and wasting your life. I can't tell them what I told you, I said firmly. I know. But maybe there's a way to help them understand that you're successful without revealing classified information. Maybe if they just knew you had a senior position. That's still classified, Marcus. Then what do we do? He asked. Just let them keep thinking you're a failure. I didn't have a good answer to that. 2 weeks later, the situation resolved itself in a way I never expected. Mom and Dad were watching the evening news when a segment came on about Cyber Command's recent operations. The report was carefully sanitized. No specific operational details, no classified information. Just a general overview of the Russian cyber threat and how U.S. Cyber Command had successfully defended against it. The segment included an interview with Admiral Richardson. And in the background, visible for approximately 3 seconds, was me, sitting at a workstation in the operations center, clearly in a position of authority. Dad called me immediately. "Sarah, we just saw you on the news." "Did you?" I asked carefully. "You were in some kind of command center. With Admiral Richardson. Do you work for him?" "I work in Cyber Command, Dad." "I've told you that. But you looked like you were in charge of something. You weren't just analyzing data. You were running an operation." "I can't discuss the specifics of my work," I said. "You know that." There was a long pause. "Sarah," Mom said she'd picked up the other extension, "are you actually important?" I almost laughed at the phrasing. "I do important work, yes." "How important?" "I can't quantify that, Mom." "Try," Dad said. "Because we've been telling people you do data analysis and now we're wondering if we've been underselling you." "You could say that," I admitted. Another pause. "The Admiral on TV," Mom said slowly. "He's your boss." "He's my direct supervisor, yes." "And you work in, what did they call it? The operations center." "Yes." "Doing what exactly?" "Coordinating defensive cyber operations for the United States military," I said, figuring that much was public record. "I can't be more specific than that." I could practically hear their minds racing, recalculating everything they thought they knew about my career. "Sarah," Dad said finally. "How senior is your position?" "Senior enough that I can't discuss it with people who don't have clearances," I said. "Which includes you." "But more senior than we thought." "Yes." "Significantly more senior?" "Stat. Significantly more senior." Mom made a small noise that might have been a gasp or a laugh. "Oh my God. When we were telling people you did low-level analysis work." "You weren't wrong exactly," I said. "I do analyze things. Just at a higher level than you realized." "How high?" Dad asked. "High enough that Russian intelligence services are very interested in what I do," I said. "Which is why I don't discuss it with family. To keep you safe." There was a very long silence. "We need to talk," Mom said finally. "Can you come to dinner this weekend? We'll keep it small. Just the 4 of us." "I can try," I said. "Assuming no national security emergencies." "Of course," Dad said, and his tone was completely different now. Respectful. Almost deferential. "We understand if you have to cancel. For work." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment and smiled. It had taken 9 years, but my parents finally understood that I wasn't wasting my potential. That my job mattered. That the long hours and the secrecy and the missed family events were because I was doing something vital. They still didn't know I was about to be promoted to 3-star general. They still didn't know the full scope of my responsibilities. They probably never would. But they knew enough. And for now, that was all I needed.
Life changes in unexpected ways. One moment you're folding shirts in your family's small clothing store, dreaming of something more. And the next you're watching your father throw your accounting textbooks onto the wet pavement outside. I was 22 when it happened. The daughter who was supposed to carry on the family business, not the one who dared to want more. Our store, Fashion Corner, had been my parents' pride and joy for 25 years. They'd built it from nothing after immigrating to America, turning a tiny shop in a rundown strip mall into a moderately successful business. It wasn't much, but it was their everything. "Emily, fold these properly." Mom would snap, redoing my work for the 100th time. "How will you run this store if you can't even fold a simple sweater?" That was the thing. I never wanted to run the store. Don't get me wrong. I respected what my parents had built. I understood their sacrifice, the countless hours they'd worked to give me a better life. But their dream wasn't mine. I still remember the day I first saw the night class flyer at the community college. Associate's degree in accounting, evening classes available. My hands trembled as I took a photo of it with my phone. For weeks after, I'd lie awake at night, imagining a different future than the one my parents had planned. It took me 3 months to gather the courage to enroll. 3 months of secretly saving every tip, every extra dollar I could squeeze from my store salary. My plan was simple: work at the store during the day, take classes at night, and somehow make it all work. For 2 months, I managed to keep it hidden. I'd leave the store at 6 p.m., claiming I was meeting friends or going to the gym. Instead, I'd rush to my accounting classes, heart pounding with equal parts exhaustion and excitement. For the first time in my life, I felt alive, challenged, like I was moving towards something instead of standing still. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the middle of my advanced accounting class when my phone started buzzing. 20 missed calls from my parents. A customer had seen me walking into the college and mentioned it to my mother. By the time I got home, they were waiting. "What is this?" Dad demanded, holding up my course schedule that he'd found in my bag. His face was that particular shade of red I'd only seen a few times in my life. When we'd been robbed last year, when my brother told them he was moving to Europe for a job. "I can explain," I started, but Mom cut me off. "Explain what?" "That you're wasting your time with useless classes instead of learning the business. That you're throwing away everything we built for you." "I'm not throwing anything away," I protested. "I can do both. Work here during the day, study at night." "No." Dad's fist came down on the counter so hard the register rattled. "You choose right now. The store or these foolish classes." I looked at them both, my mother's disappointed face, my father's anger, and for the first time in my life, I chose myself. "The classes," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. "Then get out." Dad's voice was cold, final. He walked to my workstation, grabbed my accounting textbooks, and threw them through the front door onto the rain-soaked sidewalk. "If education is more important than family, then go. Don't come back until you've learned your place." Mom didn't say a word. She just turned her back, straightening a rack of dresses as if I'd already disappeared. I gathered my soaked books from the pavement, mascara running down my face as I tried to save the pages. My whole life was in that store, but as I watched my parents lock the door behind me, I realized something important. It wasn't the life I wanted. That night, I slept on my best friend Sophia's couch, my wet textbooks spread out on her coffee table to dry. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, bringing me a cup of tea and a blanket. "But what's your plan?" I stared at my books, their pages wrinkled, but still readable. "I'm going to finish what I started," I said finally. "I have to." The next few months were the hardest of my life. I found a job as a bookkeeper's assistant at a small firm, barely making enough to split rent with Sophia. Every morning, I'd walk past Fashion Corner on my way to work, watching my parents open up through the big front windows. They never looked up, never acknowledged me. It was like I'd ceased to exist. My brother James tried to mediate at first. "Just apologize," he'd say during our secret coffee meetings. "Tell them you made a mistake. They'll forgive you." But I hadn't made a mistake. Every night in class, every practice problem I solved, every concept I mastered, it all felt right in a way that folding clothes never had. 1 year turned into 2. I finished my associate's degree with honors and immediately enrolled in a bachelor's program. My entry-level bookkeeping job became a junior accountant position. I moved out of Sophia's place into a tiny studio apartment of my own. Still, every morning, I'd walk past the store. Mom and Dad were always there, working just as hard as they had when I was a child. The strip mall around them was changing. Stores closing, new ones opening, rents rising with each passing year. The fashion corner remained frozen in time, exactly as I remembered it, until the day I saw the notice posted on the building's main entrance. No TIC of SAALE. Prime retail location. All inquiries to Maxwell Real Estate Group. My heart stopped. The whole strip mall was being sold. What would happen to my parents' store? To their dream? I knew from my morning walks that business hadn't been great lately. The neighborhood was gentrifying, and Fashion Corner's outdated inventory and tired storefront stood out like a relic from another era. That night, I couldn't sleep. My parents might have thrown me out, but they were still my parents. The store might not have been my dream, but it was theirs. And now, after 25 years, they might lose everything. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Property records, tax assessments, market values. Numbers had become my language, and what they told me wasn't good. The strip mall was undervalued, and any new owner would likely double or triple the rents to match market rates. My parents would never be able to afford it. I sat there in my tiny apartment, surrounded by textbooks and financial statements, and made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I called Maxwell Real Estate Group. The receptionist almost dismissed me until I mentioned I was interested in purchasing, not leasing. Suddenly, her tone changed. "Miss Carter?" "Yes, Mr. Maxwell can see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. I looked at my bank account that night. 5 years of aggressive saving and smart investments had left me with a decent nest egg, but nowhere near enough to buy a commercial property. Still, I put on my best suit, the one I'd bought to celebrate my promotion to senior accountant, and walked into that meeting like I belonged there. Robert Maxwell was exactly what you'd expect from a successful real estate broker. Expensive suit, practiced smile, firm handshake. "So, Miss Carter, you're interested in the Riverside Strip Mall?" "Yes," I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "Particularly, the unit currently occupied by Fashion Corner." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting choice. That's one of our less profitable units. The current tenants are on a very old lease agreement. Any new owner would want to adjust that to market rates." My stomach clenched. "And what are the current market rates?" When he named the figure, my blood ran cold. It was triple what my parents were paying. They'd never survive that increase. "The entire property is listed at $2.8 million, he continued, sliding a glossy brochure across his desk. "We're expecting significant interest." I took the brochure, my mind racing. $2.8 million might as well have been $28 million. Even with my savings and excellent credit, no bank would give me a loan that size based on my current salary. But I had something else. Knowledge. 5 years of accounting work had taught me to read between the lines of financial statements. 3 years of networking had given me contacts in the real estate industry. 2 years of advanced business classes had shown me how to spot opportunities others might miss. "I'd like to see the property's financial records," I said. Maxwell looked surprised, but agreed. For the next week, I spent every free moment analyzing those documents. The previous owner had been neglecting the property for years. Several units were vacant, and the occupied ones were severely under market. The building needed repairs, but nothing structural. Most importantly, the owner was motivated to sell quickly due to health issues. I made some calls. Sophia, now a successful real estate attorney, helped me understand the legal aspects. My old professor from business school introduced me to a group of private investors who specialized in commercial properties. My boss at the accounting firm gave me a glowing reference when the bank started asking questions. 2 weeks later, I walked back into Maxwell's office with a proposal, $2.2 million, with 20% down from a combination of my savings and private investors. The rest would come from a commercial loan backed by the property's potential income once brought up to market rates. Bold strategy, Maxwell said, reviewing my proposal. But risky. What makes you think you can turn this property around? I pulled out my detailed business plan. Because I understand this neighborhood. I know what it needs, and I know how to provide it. The negotiations took another month. Every night, I'd walk past the store, watching my parents close up shop, unaware that their daughter was fighting to secure their future. Sometimes, Mom would step outside to sweep the sidewalk, and I'd duck into doorways to avoid being seen. It hurt, but I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. Finally, after what felt like endless meetings, paperwork, and sleepless nights, I had the keys in my hand. I was now the owner of the Riverside Strip Mall, including my parents' store. The first few months were a blur of activity. I hired contractors to repair the roof and update the facade. I brought in a professional property management company to handle day-to-day operations. Most importantly, I made sure all communications with current tenants came from the management company, not me. One by one, I filled the vacant units with carefully selected businesses: a trendy coffee shop, a boutique fitness studio, a local artisan marketplace. The strip mall began to transform, and foot traffic increased dramatically. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The management company sent out notices to all tenants about the upcoming lease renewals and rent adjustments. I sat in my car across the street the morning I knew my parents would receive the notice. Dad got the mail as he always did at 10 a.m. I watched him open the envelope, saw his face change as he read it. He rushed inside, presumably to show Mom. Through the window, I could see them gesturing frantically, papers spread across the counter where I used to fold clothes. Mom wiped her eyes with her apron. Dad kept shaking his head. That afternoon, they called the number on the notice, not knowing they were calling the management company I'd hired. "Please," I heard Mom say through the recording I'd received later. "We've been here for 25 years. We can't afford triple the rent. Our daughter, she used to help us with the books, but..." Her voice broke. "Is there any way to negotiate?" I sat in my new office, the one with a view of the city skyline, listening to that message over and over. My mother's voice, smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it, asking for help. The next day, I received an email from the management company. My parents had scraped together every penny they could, trying to offer a counter-proposal. It wasn't nearly enough to match market rates, but they were trying. I stared at their desperate attempt to save their life's work and made another decision. I asked the management company to send them a different kind of letter. 2 days later, I watched through the window as Dad opened this new letter. His hands shook as he read it. Mom grabbed it from him, her eyes widening. The letter offered them a 5-year lease at their current rate, with only minimal annual increases for inflation. The only condition? They had to meet with the new owner in person to sign the paperwork. I scheduled the meeting for a Wednesday morning, deliberately choosing a time I knew they'd be in the store. As I parked my car that day, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Gone was the scared girl who'd picked up her wet textbooks from the pavement. In her place was a successful businesswoman in a tailored suit, about to change everything. I took a deep breath and walked toward the store that had once been my prison, but had inadvertently set me free. The bell above the door chimed as I walked into Fashion Corner. The sound was exactly as I remembered, a gentle tinkle that had been the soundtrack to my childhood. The store smelled the same too, that mix of new clothes and the lavender air freshener Mom had always loved. "Welcome to Fashion Corner," Mom's voice called out automatically. She was in the back, probably sorting inventory like she did every Wednesday morning. Dad was behind the counter, organizing receipts with the same meticulous care he tried to instill in me. When they looked up and saw me, time seemed to stop. "Emily?" Mom whispered, the stack of sweaters in her arms tumbling to the floor. Dad's face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and something else I couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, but his voice lacked the authority it had carried 5 years ago. I straightened my shoulders, gripping my leather portfolio like a shield. "I believe you have a meeting scheduled with the new owner of the building." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's face turned that familiar shade of red, but this time I didn't flinch. "You?" he finally managed. "You bought the building?" "Yes." I pulled out the lease papers from my portfolio, laying them on the counter, the same counter where he'd slammed my course schedule 5 years ago. "Shall we discuss the terms?" Mom came forward slowly, like she was approaching a mirage that might disappear. "But how? Remember those useless classes?" I kept my voice professional, even as my heart raced. "Turns out accounting can feed you quite well." Dad picked up the lease with trembling hands. I watched as his eyes scanned the numbers that had once been so foreign to him, the language he dismissed as worthless. This can't be right," he muttered. "These rates, they're your current rates," I confirmed, "with minimal annual increases for inflation. The other tenants are paying market value, triple what you're paying. But for Fashion Corner, I'm offering a special long-term arrangement." "Why?" Mom's voice cracked on the word. I finally let myself really look at them. They'd aged in the past 5 years. Dad's hair was more gray than black now, and Mom's face had new lines I didn't remember. They looked smaller somehow, or maybe I'd just grown bigger. "Because you're my parents," I said simply, "and because this store is your dream. It wasn't mine. It never was. But I respect what you built here." Dad sat heavily in his chair, the lease papers crackling in his grip. "We thought, when we got the first notice about the rent increase, we thought we'd lose everything." "I know." I pulled out another chair and sat down, maintaining a professional distance despite the urge to close the gap of 5 years. "I saw the notice being posted. That's why I bought the building." "With what money?" Mom asked, still struggling to understand. "How could you afford?" "I worked hard," I said, unable to keep a hint of pride from my voice. "I finished my degrees, got promoted, made connections, did everything you taught me about running a business, just not in the way you expected." A tear rolled down Mom's cheek. "When you left?" "When you kicked me out," I corrected gently. "Yes," she acknowledged, and the admission seemed to cost her. "We thought you were making a terrible mistake, that you'd come back in a few weeks, apologizing. Instead, I built my own life. I finished, one where I could help you keep yours." Dad was still staring at the lease. "These terms, we can afford this. We can stay." "Yes, you can stay," I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The management company will send someone over this afternoon to finalize the paperwork. Unless, I hesitated, then took the plunge. Unless you prefer to sign them now, with me. The silence stretched between us, 5 years of hurt and pride and stubbornness making it hard to bridge the gap. Then Mom moved, crossing the space between us in 3 quick steps, and pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and home. "My smart, stubborn girl," she whispered in my ear. "I'm so sorry we didn't see." Dad cleared his throat. "The books," he said gruffly. "For the store. They're a mess since you left. Maybe you could look at them as our landlord?" I felt a smile tugging at my lips. "How about as your daughter instead?" He nodded, and though he didn't hug me like Mom, he did reach out and squeeze my hand, the same hand he'd once slapped an accounting textbook from. We spent the next hour going through the lease, line by line. I explained each clause, each provision, just like I'd learned to do in those night classes they'd once despised. Mom made tea in the back room, using my old mug that she'd apparently never thrown away. As I was leaving, Dad called out, "Emily?" I turned at the door, the bell chiming above me. "Next time," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "use the back entrance. No need to wait for opening hours. You still have a key, right?" I reached into my purse and pulled out my keychain. Among the new keys to my office, my condo, my car, there was a small brass key I'd never had the heart to remove. "Never got rid of it," I said softly. That night, I sat in my office overlooking the city, adding another document to the lease file, a succession plan for Fashion Corner, ensuring that whenever my parents decided to retire, the store would stay in the family. Not because I wanted to run it. That dream had never been mine. But because sometimes protecting someone else's dream is just as important as chasing your own. A week later, Mom called. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't let it go to voicemail. "The store numbers for this month," she said, her voice tentative but warm. "I was hoping you could come by and look them over. Maybe stay for dinner after." I looked at my desk calendar, at the meetings and appointments that filled my days now. Then I looked at the small brass key on my keychain, the one that had waited 5 years to be used again. "I'll come through the back door," I said. "Save me some of Dad's dumplings." Her laugh was watery, but real. "Always, Emily. Always." As I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the office window. Behind me, I could see Fashion Corner's sign glowing in the twilight, looking fresher after the renovations, but still essentially the same. Like us, changed, but still standing, still family. Sometimes the longest journeys lead you right back home, just not in a way anyone expects. 5 years ago, I'd walked away from Fashion Corner with nothing but wet textbooks and a dream. Now I owned the building, had a successful career, and was finally building the relationship with my parents that I'd always wanted. One based on respect rather than obligation. Education hadn't just fed me, it had given me the power to feed us all. The next morning, I used my key in the back door of Fashion Corner. The familiar scent of lavender welcomed me home, and this time I stayed.